Final hour OverDrive continues. Brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. We'll get to our best bets. Brought to you by FanDuel later in the hour. Bryan Hayes, Dave Feschuk of the Toronto Star. Michael DeStefano, a.k.a. Al's brother, my partsy, is in studio. We got a big hour. Leo Rautins later in the hour on the OG Anunoby trade, the loss to Detroit, the win against Cleveland. Right? That Pistons game really got buried quickly, man.
Oh, did it ever.
Yeah, you get a big trade, and Anunoby had a great run here. Like, he really did. And he really blossomed as a personality. Like, remember when he got here and people were like, what's up with this guy?
Yeah, that was a weird cat.
Like, yeah, it was like, God, I'm sure you interviewed him a ton, Dave.
Oh, yeah. Well, he was a tough interview because
Yes.
in the beginning, he would answer, like, long questions with one word.
Right.
And he wasn't being rude. He just didn't have a lot to say. He'd kind of look you in the eye, smile, and say, that's my answer.
Mm-hmm.
But, look, I mean, moving on from a guy like that is tough because there's been two players in the history of this franchise that have been on an all-defensive NBA team. It's Kawhi Leonard and OG Anunoby.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the minute I said this before they moved him, the minute you lose a guy that plays D like that and can make the corner three, you start going to look for a guy who plays D and can make the corner three. And they're not easy to replace.
No, and that's why the Knicks paid the price, right? And he's on an expiring deal. Now, I think the Knicks are going to pay him. I would assume he's going to stick around.
Yeah.
We'll see. I can't imagine they'd make that deal without that expectation. But you're right. I mean, OG Anunoby is a very predictable, very productive player. And it's in his prime that it continues to grow. Maybe the best wing defender in the NBA in a game where, though, like, that's as big as it gets, considering the way the game is played in 2024. The Knicks paid a good price. Like,
Yeah.
I think this makes sense for the Raptors. It was not going to be a scenario where Anunoby and Siakam were going to return. I'm not convinced Siakam does. I think this is a signal that they're moving. This is the Scotty Barnes era. It's going to be everything's about Scotty. How do you play off Scotty?
Well, that's what, like, the Emmanuel quickly, like, everyone's focusing on RJ Barrett because he's the Canadian, right? He's homegrown player coming to play home for his for his country and his hometown from Mississauga. But if you listen to, like, and read up a lot of what the basketball people are saying, and, you know, we'll get a chance to talk with Leo Rautins, Emmanuel quickly is an interesting piece. Like, he was Sixth Man of the Year runner-up last year, and the way that he plays can complement Scotty Barnes. So, like, that to me is I'm really interested to see how that works out here for Toronto.
Yeah.
And Emmanuel quickly.
There's a long history in this league of point guards in particular that are just behind a guy who's better at that particular moment. They can't get their chance.
Yeah.
Behind Kyle
Fred's a
for
great
while.
example behind Lowry. That's a great example up here where obviously Kyle was going to start. Kyle was going to get the minutes. You know, they play combo guards a little bit, but both smaller guys. Nurse was never that comfortable with it. But exactly. Lowry leaves. Fred flourishes. And I think that's, like, obviously Brunson was the man in New York.
Yeah.
Should be the man. He's going to start. Everything's going to go through him. Quickly is going to get that opportunity up here, and we'll see if he can flourish.
Well, for sure. And that'll be you can't judge this trade until you see what quickly becomes.
Exactly.
Because clearly right now, the best player went to the Knicks. And if you like that idea that the team that gets the best player wins the trade, right now the Knicks probably have the upper hand. But quickly has the potential to be a much better player.
Yes.
And a much more useful player for the Raptors in particular. But I think the other thing, that trade, it swept under the rug the fact that you lost to the team with the historic losing streak in Detroit. And it also swept under the rug the whole premise of this season, or one of them, that Masai Ujiri laid out for us. Oh, we moved on from mean old Nick Nurse, and we brought in bright-eyed Darko Rajakovic because we got guys on the bench that are way better than because Nick wouldn't play him.
Right.
And two of those guys, they believe in him so much they shipped him to New York in Precious Achiuwa and Malachi Flynn.
Yeah.
Nick Nurse was right. Like, this is it was like Belichick versus Brady, then Brady won, and you're like, all right, it was Brady. Nurse versus Messiah in terms of evaluating this roster. Nurse, it's a landslide.
Yes.
Like, it's a and it's a great point because Messiah was very clear. Well, you got to play Malachi. We like Precious. Well, then why are they in New York?
Yeah.
Like, why are they in New York? Because I know you got to fill out a trade and there's, money's got to go back and forth and you only have so many roster spots and all that. But if you really believed in those guys.
They're still young.
And they are. And, like, Precious will get an opportunity. He's incredibly inconsistent. We saw that, injury prone. Malachi Flynn, we were talking off the air. There's no way Tom Thibodeau plays him.
Hard to
He
imagine.
is not going to play on a team that wins. He is not, because he could barely play here and they can't, and they haven't won.
Yeah.
So you're right. All of a sudden, the evaluation of what they actually had, what they were, and I think a spark, like something had to change here with this team because, especially with that Pistons loss, like long-standing Raptor fans, there was some nostalgia on Saturday night. And you're like, it's been a long time. Like it actually really, it's a testament to how great this team has been run for a long time.
Yeah.
That ever since Masai showed up effectively, and they backdoored into the Rudy Gay trade working for them. They backed into James Dolan nixing the Lowry trade.
Yes.
Like they backdoored into stuff, but they became a very successful winning team that eventually won a championship. And then even the next 2 or 3 years, they were pretty good.
Good team.
But this year has been ugly.
Yeah.
It's been tough to watch. They're not a good team, not a fun team. There's no prospects of the future really turning around. Your number one pick, Grady Dick, is playing for the 905.
And not playing that well. And then you lose to Detroit. It's like, all right, it's been a while, but we've been there. Like the Raptors, they've been there.
Yeah, it's
and
funny.
This trade can possibly change the vibe a little bit. We got CJ on the line. Leo Rautins will join us in about 25 minutes. More on the Raptors and them heading to Memphis. The Leafs are in LA tonight. Here's our TSN hockey insider, Chris Johnston. How you doing, CJ?
I'm doing well, guys. Happy New Year.
Yes, Happy New Year. Thank you for doing this. On a separate trade front, we've been talking about the goaltending situation, obviously, all afternoon. It's the topic of discussion among Leaf fans, with Ilya Samsonov being placed on waivers, going unclaimed. Dennis Hildeby is up. It's January 2nd. They're on the road. And Martin Jones is playing, and Dennis Hildeby likely starts tomorrow. Yet the Leafs are not the only team in possibly desperate scenarios here in terms of pursuing goaltending. Like, what are you hearing league-wide? Where do the Leafs come into play on maybe trying to find another goalie?
Well, they're certainly in good company around the league. There's a lot of teams out there that I think have been dissatisfied with the goaltending they've received this season. I mean, we've already seen Carolina do something similar to what the Leafs have done in sending Antti Raanta down to the American Hockey League this year. Obviously, Jack Campbell was in that situation in November in Edmonton. And I think that there's a number of teams that would like to upgrade the position. What those GMs seem to have found in common, there's not a lot of clear, obvious decisions for them to make, and not a lot of players for them to bring in to satisfy that. Certainly not in a league where most of the really good teams don't have any cap space. And the Leafs have cap space in the moment because they have some players that are out injured, but they don't project to have a lot, once they come through that injury situation. And so I think, there's no way to put a positive spin on this. I mean, this is certainly not where you want to find yourself if you're Brad Treliving, but, they're trying to find some answers for Ilya Samsonov because, the best way forward is him figuring out his game for the Maple Leafs' sake and for his own, obviously. And if that doesn't happen here in short order, I don't see a ton of options out there that make sense that can improve things in the short term.
Yeah, I'm curious about the Samsonov angle, CJ. Like, the coach has turned on him. Sheldon Keefe doesn't want him, didn't want to play him anymore. That's why this resulted in what it resulted in. So, like, I just can't picture him stepping back in that room. Like, I'm just curious how likely you think that is, that Samsonov is an answer for them in the future.
It doesn't feel terribly likely today, does it? And I guess the only reason you hang on to that is sort of Brad Treliving mentioned, the reporters down there in California, is, they've seen him be a good goaltender in the past, certainly had a lot of good games for this organization last season. I think the problem looking at it now is this year, for whatever reason, it's been a problem from day one. He struggled in training camp. They've given him times off here during the year at various points where, he wasn't even the backup for a few games when he was healthy, just to give him a little bit of a reset. I mean, he's just coming off the holiday break, right? Starting in Columbus was off a few days off. And the idea, of course, now with his time away from the team is you're just trying to get him out of the negative cycle that he's been in. But, I don't know if that's going to happen. It's hard for me to put percentage, on that or even to gauge the likelihood, just because it seems like a lot of what's going on here is between the ears for Samsonov. And so, I don't know if this will help. I don't know, they've tried so much else that hasn't helped. And, ultimately that is the best case scenario for the Leafs, is that he can play, just give them some decent starts down the stretch. But, maybe that doesn't happen. I mean, the other thing they were facing here is that when Joe Woll became healthy, which, probably won't happen until after the All-Star break, But they were going to have to put Martin Jones on waivers potentially if they were going to send him down. And so there was going to be a decision in the future, at least by passing Samsonov through now, that they're not going to face that kind of decision, when Wall's healthy.
Well, CJ, like, how much of it is they got to figure out things defensively? Like, you can put Martin Jones out there, you can put Dennis Hildeby and Samsonov, but until they figure something out on the blue line, like, is that something now that maybe Tree Living, like, they went through December, they got through it, but now things are starting to look bleak again? Like, is that something that we're going to see kind of the chatter heat up now for them to maybe add to the blue line?
Yeah, I think that's been a common theme in the way that the Leafs have looked at their issues internally. Is they felt, certainly, especially in the early part of the season, they didn't defend very well as a group. I think we concur with that. I think, where the concern has arisen here in the last few weeks is, some of those numbers have trended in a better direction. The 6-5 loss in Columbus, I think, was 21 shots they allowed against. The Carolina game, they didn't give up a whole lot. I mean, they've actually seen a little bit of uptick here in some of the way that they performed in front of the goalies and just weren't getting enough saves. And I suppose that the one bailout that's come into play here is Martin Jones has actually played well in his limited time in the NHL for the Leafs this season. He's, I think 915 or 916 save percentage, and he's, gotten them some wins. And so, he started the year as a number 3, and it's actually allowed them maybe to get through this a little bit. But as I say, I mean, there's no positive spin to be put on this. I think the Leafs are in a situation where, like a lot of teams, they like to improve the position. There's not an easy choice there, and you're just trying to get through this stretch of games with the guys you have until, ultimately when Joe Wall is healthy. I mean, because he did play so well before suffering that high ankle sprain.
Well, CJ, if we're sort of lingering on weak spots in the lineup here, what did you make of Sheldon Keefe's decision to make an example out of David Kampf and sit him out of the game against the Hurricanes, essentially saying he's got to get back to what made him successful? He's certainly not the only one that has been careless out there, maybe not performing at a high level on a 200-foot basis, but he's the one that the coach chose. What did you see there?
Well, I was a little surprised by it. I mean, normally when coaches are sending that message, it might be someone a little higher up the lineup. It doesn't necessarily have to be a full-on scratch, but, we've seen a number of prominent players around the league this year either bolted to the bench for a period or two, or a few of them have been scratched around the league, and that tends to get everyone's attention. In David Kampf's situation, obviously he's meant to be a defensive presence for them, kind of the anchor of their fourth line, and I didn't really see that one coming, and I'm not sure it worked to great effect with the result of what happened is that the penalty killer to the team weakened them at that position. But I mean, I do understand in a larger sense you're trying to push all the buttons you can. I don't know if that one worked out the way it was designed to, and I just wonder how much attention you're ever going to get, because while Kampf has been a regular member of the Leafs, have played every game since coming over to the team these last couple of years. It's not exactly someone in the dressing room where everyone goes, oh wow. I mean, it's not the same as maybe fitting someone out who's up higher in the lineup.
With Chris Johnston, our TSN Hockey Insider. Yesterday, you had the Winter Classic. Seattle beating Vegas. Seattle's now won 5 in a row. Edmonton's won 5 in a row, but Seattle's coming on stronger as well. And you've been to a bunch of these, CJ. You've covered a bunch of them. They've been around now for well over a decade. Where do you stand on, I know the NHL still loves them. They sell out. They do great in their individual markets. It feels to me, though, and I guess it was largely COVID, like they've kind of scaled back on the amount of outdoor games. Am I reading that right? Or, where does the NHL stand on these outdoor stadium games?
I think they've found what they think is a sweet spot. I mean, essentially, you're getting one every second year in Canada. With they call that the Heritage Classic. Obviously, the Winter Classic is a January 1st staple, and then there's a couple other Stadium Series games that follow them. And I do think that you get to a point where it's hard to make them sort of national spectacles. I mean, everyone's kind of seen it now. It's not, maybe some of the novelties worn off, although it was pretty cool during the pandemic when they took the one game to Lake Tahoe just to see the scenes there. It did give them some chances to do some different things when they didn't have to worry about bringing fans in. But I think what we're down to now is that this is a game that does perform well in the markets. I know lots of teams still want to have them, which will ultimately be the decider as long as you have teams stepping up that want to host these things and that feel they can make them into money-making ventures. And I don't see any stop to it. But there was a year, a number of years ago, I think it was 5 or 6 outdoor games. I mean, I don't think we'll be seeing anything like that. But 2 to 3 years seems to be about right. And the league seems really satisfied with how it went in Seattle. I mean, certainly got a great crowd there, and a big win for the Kraken yesterday.
Something to chew on brought to you by Boston Pizza. This January at Boston Pizza, get delicious mouth-watering pastas starting at $11.99 every single day. Enjoy the pastas you love at prices you can't miss. Hustle in your local BP tonight. And CJ, we've been asking people online, something to chew on. Is Canada still the undisputed hockey powerhouse at the international level? Obviously, the juniors lost today. They played well. They probably should have won. It's one quarterfinal loss. They had won the previous two golds. But on an international level, the reason we bring this up is Bettman was speaking to the TNT panel yesterday and said it's coming. Like, they're going to announce a best on best. The belief is they're going to be at the Olympic Games. And Canada has been the powerhouse forever. I mean, really, since the existence of this game. Where do you stand on that question, though, CJ? Like, is there a challenger? Are there multiple challengers? Has Canada done anything specifically at the goaltending position that maybe allows them to come back to the pack? How would you answer that question?
Well, I think unquestionably Canada's the favorite heading into any best-on-best event. Certainly on the men's side of the game, you might have a debate on the women's side with the way things have gone with Team USA over the last number of big competitions. Where we're at is, if you look forward to the possibility of a year from now having one of those tournaments, I think on paper there is a case to say that Team USA's team looks better than what Team Canada is likely to bring to that event. I say that knowing full well you're going to have, McDavid, McKinnon, Crosby, potentially Bedard, and a whole bunch of other star players pulling on the Canadian sweater for that tournament. But I actually went through the exercise over the holidays, and Team USA is a pretty darn good team on paper. But I just feel that until we see those, another country have the consistent success that Canada has on the international stage, it's hard to say that Canada's been knocked out of the catbird seat. I still think they're the team to beat in any tournament, but the day is coming. It feels like I intend to live a lot longer, guys. I do feel like over the course of my lifetime that we're going to see it continue to trend away where there's more countries that can win, and probably the frequency with which Canada's won in the last 15 or 20 years in big tournaments is going to be reduced, just with the growth of the game in other places of the world.
Mm-hmm. CJ, we were talking earlier in the show about the Cole Perfetti, Ryan Hartman situation. Of course, Hartman is fined the maximum amount, about $4,400 for slashing Perfetti in the face in the game between Minnesota and Winnipeg the other night. And Perfetti comes out and says, CJ, that, hey, he told me he was going to do it. It was retribution for Dylan on Kaprizov, and there you go. But because there was a mic'd up situation, the whole thing about the intention that Ryan Hartman tells Perfetti about cannot be used by the player's safety folks. Are we interpreting this correctly, and how do you make sense of it?
Yeah, I mean, that, big concern of the players going back to, when miking players up, first became commonplace was, about how what they say will be used to. Here's it, where does it exist? I know the same can be said even for coaches. We've seen coaches more often now be mic'd up for long periods of time. As the league's done more of the sort of behind the scenes shows, now you have a lot of teams doing their own shows like that. And I do think that there's a sensitivity to how that's used. This is a very unusual case, so I don't recall one, at least where we found out about it, right? I mean, in this case, it takes Cole Perfetti coming out and mentioning to the reporters that not only did Hartman say this, but that it is on, had been recorded by the Jets as part of something they're going to do. And so, a deal was struck many years ago that's basically off limits for determining punishment. I suppose the answer there is that, because you don't have it for every issue, it is an unusual course, but, I wonder if it will be revisited now, because in a case like this, I haven't heard the audio, so I don't know exactly what was said, how it was framed. I've just have Perfetti's version of events that he gave to the reporters in Winnipeg, but, you'd have to think that it should be in some ways fair game, because, if it's something that, can be brought forward, it might change, the kind of punishment that should be handed out here. So I suspect we haven't heard the last of this sort of thing, because I do think that, microphones are just becoming more and more prevalent around the ice rink with players or other, people on the ice or on the benches wearing them. And, you can't unhear something once it's been recorded and it's out there in the public realm.
CJ, we'll let you go, buddy. Happy New Year. Thank you for doing this.
All right, guys. We'll talk soon.
Chris Johnston, our TSN Hockey Insider. Yeah, the mic'd up admission is pretty wild. when you think about it. And I don't know why Hartman would even admit that he did that on purpose. There's so many different layers to it. Perfetti announcing it publicly to the media that he was mic'd up, that's what Hartman told him. And then on top of it, why Hartman...
I kind of look at it, I think that's like weirdly kind of respectable about Ryan Hartman. He's like, look, kid, this is what happened. I got to get retribution. It is what it is. Like, I kind of... Not that I respect what he did, but the fact that he explained to him why he did it.
Sure. And I'm sure he's not the first guy to do that.
100%.
It's not necessary. He doesn't owe Cole Perfetti anything, especially if you're pissed off with the opponent. Like the reason you're seeking retribution is you're unhappy with Winnipeg.
Exactly.
A divisional rival. And here you are being like, hey, come here, kiddo.
Well,
just want to let you know.
Like, do you really have to explain what you meant by slashing a guy in the face for multiple
completely unprovoked off a draw?
Like, are words really necessary? Like it was pretty clear. It wasn't
and Perfetti's okay. Like it'd be different if you buried the guy and he was hurt and he's on the IR and then it's like, hey, I got to send him a text. Hey, man, blah, blah, blah. I don't. Maybe that's why he felt okay actually explaining it was because he knew Perfetti was okay.
Yeah.
But still, it's a weird situation.
It is a weird situation. And now, and CJ's right, because now it's not only the league doing these docu-series in the lead up to, the Winter Classic or whatever, but every team does their own internal, the Leafs have their blue and white or whatever.
And all access and all that
stuff. So every team's got mics on the ice at all times. And so essentially, if I'm defending my guy, if I'm an agent saying, find the mic, the tape of whatever my guy did wrong and make it inadmissible at all costs.
Well, that's why the Players Association doesn't allow for it. But you're right. I mean, everything is mic'd.
Yeah.
Everything. If something is said loud enough by the benches, there is a microphone that picked it up.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Someone has access to it.
Yes.
So, and again, if you're the players, this is where it's a dangerous line because you're the league. You want emotion. You want passion. You want hatred. You want rivalry. You can't have guys feeling like they need to be looking over their shoulders with everything they say, everything they do. Like, you want guys acting spontaneously.
Right.
And that's not to condone a high stick to the face. But battles between the bench, those are great. Yeah. That's the nature of the sport. That's what happens. It's a physical sport. Teams don't like each other. Get to a playoff series, it's crazy what's said between two benches. Yeah, you don't want to take that out of the game because players are afraid that they might get outed saying something or labeled some way. And obviously there are examples of egregious words that you cannot use. And if you do and they're caught, you should be fined or whatever. But I think we all know what those lines are. Right. And everything before that line, go for it. Bring it. Because it all is baked into the cake that is pro sports. All right, Leo Rautins coming up. Yeah, Leo will join us on the Anunoby trade, what he makes of it, what he brings, what RJ Barrett brings to the table, Emmanuel quickly brings to the table, the pick coming over from Detroit. Raptors are on a roadie now. They're in Memphis coming up. So we'll catch up with Leo, get his take on that. Our best bets brought to you by FanDuel still to come. And don't forget, TSN 1050's Leafs lineup is your chance to win Leaf tickets every week all season long. Every weekday we announce a current or former Maple Leaf player. And on Fridays, you have a chance to call in and name the Leaf lineup of the week. This week we're giving away tickets to see the Leafs play the Sharks January 9th and throwing in a $250 Vanilla Visa prepaid card with each pair of tickets to make it the ultimate game night. Vanilla Visa prepaid cards are available for purchase at Petro-Canada. Today's player of the day is Owen Nolan. Owen Nolan, former first overall pick of the Quebec City Nordique.
Little cup of coffee here in Toronto.
Yeah. He was one of those big deadline pickups.
04? Is that 04? Was that 04 when they came back from the...
I think it was 03.
It would have been
Oh, no, it was before the lockout.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I think it was 03 and then into 04. He was here for a year and a half.
Yeah.
So Owen Nolan is your player of the day. So there you go. All right, Leo Rautins coming up. Our best bets brought to you by FanDuel later in the hour. OverDrive continues. TSN 1050 and on the TSN app. All right, our best bets brought to you by FanDuel later in the hour. Leafs Kings tonight. Raptors with a win last night. Pretty emotional night. Like I thought it was the right play to have RJ Barrett and quickly start. There was some debate whether or not they'd be in the starting lineup. And RJ Barrett in particular, like as a Toronto guy, we talked about this earlier this afternoon. This is a huge opportunity for him.
Yeah.
Like a huge opportunity. He was a third overall pick. Like when he went to Duke, he was the man.
Yep.
It was not Zion Williamson. It was like, this is RJ's team and Zion's going to be a big part of it. It flipped. But you look at that draft class, like it's been a pretty wild top three, man.
Yeah.
And you consider the journeys of the three guys that went in the top three there. And now RJ's up here and he's locked in. He's on term. They're committed to him. You look at who they're committed to all of a sudden. I assume they're going to keep Pirtle. Like I would assume. I don't know, but they traded for him. They gave him the deal. They want a big.
Have to.
Yeah. So if you got Pirtle on term, you've got Scotty under control, and now you've got RJ and Emmanuel Quickly is going to be an RFA, but they're going to keep him. That's probably your team moving forward.
That's what it is.
You know, who else are you? You're not committed to Gary Trent. You're not committed to Chris Boucher.
No.
I
mean, can you get something out of Grady Dick?
Yeah, Grady Dick,
Well,
exactly. But he's not even a part of the program right now. You're right. He's under team control, though, and at some point, he better hit. Yeah,
they're hoping.
They're hoping.
I mean, there's been a lot of picks, that they could have had instead of him that are doing
right after him that are actually bringing a lot to the NBA.
Yeah.
Right now.
So and then obviously the big decision to make on Pascal Siakam, which has been lingering for an awfully long time and continues to linger.
Yeah, and all of a sudden he's playing a lot of minutes, man. Like, it's funny how that works out.
Yeah.
You start losing games, and then, OG leaves, and he's playing 40 minutes every night again.
He looked good last night, though. Like,
he looked great.
Shooting the ball well. What did he hit? 5, 6 threes last night?
He's been great recently. Like, Pascal is what he is. He's pick a number. Is he the 15th best player in the NBA? 18th, 22nd, 25th? Yeah. I don't know. Whatever he wants, whatever it is, he's not a kid, and he's not over the hill. Like, he's a pretty predictable player for the most part. Yet, he's the man, him and Scotty, on a team that have lost a lot of ball games this year.
Right.
And change was necessary, and change happened over the weekend. OG Anunoby flipped with Precious Achiuwa and Malachi Flynn down in New York. And to chat about it, we're joined now by our TSN Raptors analyst. Here's Leo Rautins. Leo, I'm sure you've been asked a lot over the last few days what you make of the deal. We'll go back to the well on you, buddy. Break it down for us. Do you like the Anunoby trade for the Raps?
You know what? I do. I think it was actually good for both teams. I think OG, even though New York gave up a little bit more, OG is a good piece for them, a good potential in terms of the guys he's got to play with, and Randall and Brunson. And when you look at the Raptors, RJ Barrett is a serviceable small forward. He's gotten better in his time in the league, and I think he's going to continue to get better. He's a player that works extremely hard on his game. He's a competitor. And one of the things he does a little different than OG offensively is that he searches out his offense, right? OG, a lot of times, will get very passive and disappear. RJ is going to search his offense. He's going to hunt down some shots, which I think is important for the Raptors to avoid some of the droughts they have. Defensively, he's not as good as OG, but to be honest with you, the way the game is going today, I don't know how big a deal that is. I think that if you can get critical stops when you need them as a team, and play well as a team, they can compensate for that. And Quickly is a player that I really like. I think he gives the Raptors something they don't have. A lot of energy, a lot of quickness. He can shoot the ball. He's a great competitor. Having him at the guard spot, I think is a huge game changer for this team.
Well, I am curious because you talk about Quickly, he's still very young, just 24 years old. Barrett's still pretty young, just 23. Presumably, they'll be part of the Raptors' future moving forward. When you look at those two guys, like, what type of ceiling do they have, and can they provide for Toronto?
Well, in terms of feeling, like I said, but they're both extreme competitors. And think about where they came from. Everybody says, well, RJ coming back to Toronto, that's a tough situation. But you play in New York, that's the toughest situation. Yeah. So both of these guys have thrived in New York, where it's extremely critical. They've had bad teams. They've gotten better. They've become a playoff team. They've been part of that. So, I think what they bring is an understanding of how to win. How to deal with the pressure, how to ignore the noise, they both play for Tom Thibodeau at the Knicks, who demands that you play D, who demands you bring a physical aspect to the game, and if you don't play. So I think a lot of those characteristics are needed for this team. That toughness, that they're willing to fight. Put it this way, they're willing to fight. They play the game with a little bit of an edge. And I think that's very welcome on this team.
Well, the guy that we know very well as a fighter, Leo, is Pascal Siakam. And obviously, you talk about the trade made to move OG Anunoby out after a lot of consternation and a lot of a lot of talk in this town about when would Masai make a move. I guess the next move, the next domino that would have to fall would be Siakam, whether you re-sign him for the long term and still trade him, or whether you trade him before the deadline. I mean, what's the most likely scenario in your mind, Leo, when you look at the way it's played out to this point in terms of Siakam? How do you see him as a member of the Raptors beyond this season, or is it more likely he's moved?
Well, I think you've got to look at the big picture, and the big picture is the last couple of seasons. Are you willing to spend the money it's going to take to keep him here, based on not just this season, but last season and even the season before? So all of that has to weigh into it. And I'm also a firm believer that trading somebody is not just a negative on that player. Pascal Siakam's kind of been in this environment for a while. He's had great success, obviously, at the very beginning with Kawhi, and he's had a lot of indifferent times here. So sometimes a change is good for both, right? And a change could be a great thing for Pascal Siakam. So as far as when or what might happen, I think it really just depends on what's available and the structure of what deal they can put together. I don't think Masai is going to sit there and Bobby Webster and just wait for the deadline. Or they may wait the deadline if the best deal rolls around at that point. But, I think the big thing is you just can't lose a Siakam if you don't do something. You can't have another Fred VanVleet situation. So, I think they'll be a little patient right now. Masai and Bobby have always kind of shown a lot of patience when they make a change, when they do something, to see, how it fits, how it looks. But ultimately, I think if the right deal comes across the table, I wouldn't be surprised if they took it.
Yeah, it's a big commitment, right? Like at some point, if you bring Siakam back and you sign him to a large ticket, you're creeping up on the luxury tax for a team that's just not that good right now. I don't see how ownership factors in here too, right, Leo? Like they got to sell ownership on spending a lot of money on a team that's 7 games under 500. Right,
and if I'm ownership, I'm also going to look at the last 2 years because quite frankly, if you look at their team goes as your best players go. And, this team has been up and down and has played. Sometimes, you shake your head. You see a team that is as competitive as can be against the best teams and then disappears against other teams. So I'm looking at all that. And if your best players are the ones that play that way, then it goes down the entire roster. So you have to make changes at the top. And obviously there's a commitment to Scotty Barnes, rightfully so. At his age, he's already shown that he's willing to answer the call. He's shown a tremendous improvement between last year and this year, doing a lot of little things to make his game, that much better, especially shooting the basketball. So, I think that you want guys that are going to play the game a certain way, play the game with an edge, and compete every night. Because when you really look around the league, there's some really good teams. But there's no great teams, and you're not that far off. That's the that's the thing that I think is kind of the hook for Masai and Bobby Webster when they look at this roster. You're not that far off. You're really not. And so you go, okay, because you can see what they do when they all play at a very high level. You saw when OG, Pascal, and Scotty, when they played at a high level all together, they could beat anybody. But you just didn't see it consistently, right? And again, you also have some other areas down the roster where you got to work on, but you're not that far off. So I think if you can make a move to get you where you want to get to, maybe a little bit quicker based on what you've seen already, and financially, and that's the big one. Financially, it makes sense going forward. I think they got to look at it.
With Leo Rautins, I mean, you look at the standings in the NBA. Look at Oklahoma City; they're second in the West.
Incredible,
like
good team.
They're a really good team. But
and do they scare you when you look at them? Do they scare you? No. I mean, the Raptors can beat OKC, But, they're a team that's playing really well. And again, there's a big difference in regular season and playoffs. Big difference.
Right.
But there's a lot of young talent on that. Okay, there's not that much difference between the Raptors and a lot of these teams that are in the top of the league.
Well, how much of it is going to be based on Scotty Barnes, Leo, and his continued development? He's had a great year. He's only into his third season. He's still young. Like, how much of the role of Darko Rajokovic the rest of this season and into next is we just got to keep tapping into this guy's potential?
Oh, hey, yeah, I think you need to because he's showing a lot of versatility, right? I mean, he's a guy that can take the pressure off the backcourt, handle the basketball. He also can get the ball off the glass and bring it up the floor, which is a huge thing in today's game more than ever. The fact that he can step outside and shoot threes and keep the defense honest, that's the biggest adjustment.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I made this point before that, Magic Johnston came into the NBA as the number one pick, and he realized after half a season that if he can't make a jump shot, he can't play his game. And he came into next season. He wasn't a great shooter, but you had to respect him from the three, and you had to respect him from the foul line because he would knock that jumper down. And that made him one of the great players in this league because they could do everything else. And Scotty can do everything else. The fact that he's made such a jump shooting the basketball really tells me a lot of who he is. Also, he's a lot stronger. His conditioning is a lot better than last year. So he's a guy that gets it. So he's a guy you can expect more, demand more, but you also want to take some pressure off of him, right? If you have more shooting, more perimeter scoring around him, that opens up the floor for him. Otherwise, if it's congested, it's going to take a lot of his game away. And also, Scotty's a competitor at the defensive end. If you've got guys that aren't pulling the load at that end, he's going to get frustrated. And because he knows you're not going to win a lot of games. So again, you don't have to be the greatest defensive team, but you got to come out and compete every single night, and you got to get critical stops. So I think Scotty's one of those guys that gives that to you, and he's going to expect that from the guys he's playing with.
Leo, one of the things that maybe didn't get a lot of publicity in the wake of the loss to the Pistons because of the trade and all the other changes was Dennis Schroeder's comments. And they piqued my interest because this whole season has been built on the premise that the Raptors had to stop being unselfish or stop being selfish and be more unselfish, obviously in the words of Masai Ujiri, who accused them of a lot of selfishness last season. And Schroeder, in the wake of that loss to the Pistons, was essentially saying they're playing a little more selfishly than they should be, that if we keep playing like this, nobody's going to win. What did you make of Schroeder's comments? And I'm just curious about how you feel about the level of selfishness on this team at this point.
Well, I think it's good if a player speaks up. I mean, Masai said everything at the end of last season and at the beginning of this season. And I think it's important to make those points. And hey, Schroeder's a point guard. Schroeder also he's played a lot of different places. He's had great success on the FIBA stage. And, when you look at the way you win in this game, you got to play together. You got to sacrifice. And I think and Darko's got a system, right? Darko's got a system and how they want to play. And if you just break the system all the time, if you just do whatever you want to do, you're not going to have that ultimate success you want to have. And you got to understand what you're trying to do. So if players are breaking away from it, the players are just kind of doing their own thing, ultimately you can say that's selfish. And sometimes the player will go, well, I'm not being selfish. I'm just playing my game. Well, no, you're being selfish because you're not doing what needs to be done as a team for this team to win. And I think Schroeder as a point guard should be ones to step up. I think you got to step up in a locker room, maybe not necessarily publicly that much, but in a locker room, you certainly you can't be afraid to voice your opinion on how guys are playing and what they got to do, as long as you're doing the right thing. And I think he's trying to play the right way. I could see some frustration on his part at times, with some of the shots and some of the things players do. But ultimately, that's where, again, I think that Masai and Bobby Webster are looking at every guy on his team. They brought in Darko. That obviously means they would like to play a certain way from a management point of view. And if players aren't playing that way or cannot play that way, and, if you want to, one of the players that, said that, I'm not selfish was Pascal Siakam. Yet Pascal Siakam is the one player who has said that, he's had the most trouble adjusting to this. And people say that he's got the most trouble adjusting to this. Why? If you're a good offensive player, having freedom offensively, which this offense gives you, it's just about making decisions and reacting and playing off one another. And if that's difficult, that you have to find a way to play your game, then then maybe that's something you really got to look at when you're looking at making a move and go for the long term, because you hired a coach to play a certain way. And it is a player like Pascal, is a player like Gary Trent Jr. Are they going to play that way? And I think those are big decisions they got to make going forward.
Always great catching up with you, Leo. Happy New Year's, buddy. We'll do it again soon. Thank you for this.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
I was going to say Happy New Year again, but I already did that. Leo Rautins joining us here, our TSN Raptors analyst. Yeah, I'm big in the New Year. Early in. It's only the second day.
Yeah.
There is a statute of limitations.
What is that, though? Has that been established?
I think it's like you got a week and a half.
Yeah, like 10 days after that.
You get into mid-January, that's
off.
enough.
Yeah, okay.
Just relax.
Good to know.
Yeah, I think so.
I saw a crazy stat over the weekend. This was prior to the Pistons game. Scotty Barnes, over his last 10 games leading up to that Pistons loss, 24.7 points per game, 10 rebounds per game, 6.9 assists per game. Here's the complete list of players that averaged 24, 10, and 6 over any 10-game span before the age of 23. Luka Doncic, Giannis Antetokounmpo, LeBron James, Chris Webber, Magic Johnson, Bernard King, Oscar Robertson, Scotty Barnes.
Pretty good.
Not bad.
A lot of Hall of Famers in there.
A lot of Hall of Famers.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
He's coming into his own. It's fun to watch.
Yeah, he's been great. Like, he had that rebound late in the game last night.
Oh, ripped it down.
And that's what Leo was saying. Like, now the ability to get up, get a board, and move, significant, right? And I mean, they're finally changing the lineup a little bit. Like, ball's going to be in his hand a lot moving forward.
I hope it becomes infectious. And you see guys like, RJ Barrett, for one. We got 9 boards last night. Can he start going up and grabbing those rebounds the way that Scotty's doing it, right? Can we start to see the rest of this team, the depth of this team start to come up?
Listen, they're 13 and 20. Like, they're out of the play-in right now.
On paper, they look better than 13 and 20.
Have they?
They look like they are better than that.
The way they start games, the way they shoot, their half-court offense, it's around 13 and 20, I think.
Yeah.
I do, Al's brother, right? Like, they're not that good. Last year, they weren't that good. They were ninth in the East.
They could be a 500 team and still be a playoff team in the NBA.
Yeah, it's not over yet. Like, look at Chicago. They started to win ball games. Now they're all of a sudden leapfrogging the Raps, and they're 10th in the East. There's not a lot of great teams, to Leo's point. Like, I think Boston is the clear-cut best team in the East. But
yeah,
outside of that, you look at the West. I mean, you got Minnesota, Oklahoma City, New Orleans.
A lot of unproven teams there.
Yeah.
A lot of teams that have really good records, but as Leo said, would they scare you in a playoff series? Would you feel like, oh, we can't beat these guys?
It's impossible.
No, I don't feel that way.
The only thing that's clarified is the awful teams.
Yes.
Like, Detroit is horrendous.
Yeah.
San Antonio is horrendous. Yeah. And Washington is horrendous. But
there's a lot of teams right in the middle who feel like they're one guy away or one move away from being a lot better than they are.
Sure.
And the Raptors,
they feel like they're that team. Yep. Exactly. All right, our best bets brought to you by FanDuel coming up. OverDrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 2. All right, today's best bets are powered by FanDuel. Make your picks and assemble a same-game parlay in seconds on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Looking at the Leafs-Kings game tonight. Goal in the first 10 minutes. Yes, I love it. But I kind of feel like this could be an under game. The total 6.5. I'm not going to bet it, but it feels like a 3-2 game. Yeah,
Toronto stands a chance. I think it's kind of got to be.
Right. And I think the Leafs, I didn't think they were awful against Carolina. It wasn't a great game. Like, it was a pretty
low event
game. And that's the way Carolina plays, though, too. And Kochetkov actually played really well. But anyway, goal in the first 10 tonight. Matthews anytime goal. He hits 30 tonight. I think he starts the new year with a snipe. He loves LA. It just feels like he gets on the board tonight. And Marner, I didn't think he was very good on Saturday night. We saw the turnover that ended the game. I think he owes this team a big night. When he's flying, he gets shots on net. 3+ shots tonight for Mitch. So goal in the first 10 minutes. Matthews anytime goal. Mitch Marner 3+ shots. Big plus money on that parlay. Today's best bets are powered by FanDuel. FanDuel's goal in the first 10 minutes is the most electric bet in hockey and can be included in any same-game parlay on any NHL game. Please play responsibly. Must be 19 plus and physically located in Ontario.
It's a revenge game for Marty Jones, too.
Leafs Kings tonight.
Revenge game, revenge narrative for him.
Yeah.
Draft as a king. Mm-hmm. He's got pretty good numbers against them, too.
His numbers have been good this year, man.
Yeah.
Like, again, Saturday night, that was not his issue. Like,
No.
that was kind of cool that Bunting scored. And,
Yeah.
And when they like, I was down at the game, and when they put him up on the board, like, as a welcome back, there was some boos getting scattered. I was
Really?
surprised. I swear I heard boos. I'm like, why
What's the
would you
beef?
boo a local guy?
People loved Bunts.
Yeah.
That's
Although he
strange.
did, the
I don't know.
suspension that was stupid. Like, he got suspended for the Chernak hit.
Yeah.
But it didn't cost them. They won
No,
the
they
series.
still won the series.
Yeah. Maybe it was like bunt. Like, maybe they were.
Like the Lou
yeah, exactly.
type of thing.
Were you saying Boo or Burns? I was saying Burns. Maybe they were just saying bunting. I don't know. But it was a cool story for him. And he's playing PP1 on that team.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't notice him much the rest of the night, but he did score that goal.
And he went and got paid.
Yeah,
He went and got paid. Thought I heard he might be they might be looking to move on from him too, weirdly.
He's getting ice time.
Yeah.
Playing down there. All right, boys. Good seeing you guys. Dave?
Seeing you.
Great seeing you. Dave Feschuk of the Toronto Star. Al's brother. We need tremendous information this week.
Yeah.
We need it this
We're gonna
week.
cook it up. We're gonna cook it up.
Week 18, we get rocking. Playoffs, we prepare a championship parade. Right? They might have their banner for the regular season. Hayes and Bro, we are built for the playoffs. Thanks to everyone behind the scenes for helping out. We appreciate it. Everyone for tuning in today. Radio, TV, podcast, web, we appreciate that. We're out of here. Enjoy your evenings. Enjoy the games tonight. We're back tomorrow at
4 p.m.
We'll chat then.